Hello and welcome to Georgina's Stripping the Dipping. You're joined by your usual co-host, Denzel Clarkson. And what can I say? Whilst we're chasing the other side's lawyer, we chase the judgment like Pablo Montoya. And on today's episode, we have Florida lawyer Malik. Malik, sir, thank you for being a part of today's show. It's an absolute honor to have your time as well. How are you keeping today?
I'm doing very, very well, sir. Could be worse. At some point, it probably will be, but right now, I'm doing pretty good.
Hey, well, we're not good. We're gonna rebuke it. We hope that everything's gonna be okay, and we've got a lot to
Gotcha.
unpack. So there's definitely that. And also, just hiding in the background like a surprise Pikachu, we also have F1blag, a returner to the show and a legend within our Twitter scene too for the 44. How have you been, F1blag? And did you get up to much over the Easter break with no F1 during that time?
I know. Well, I've actually really been enjoying the weekends without F1 recently. But no, I had a great weekend. As I was saying, I've turned a bit too British and enjoyed the 18-degree heat wave. And I've been really looking forward to this chat. In fact, when you were introducing me and calling me Pikachu, I was just tweeting that I could already tell this episode's going to be one that people want to listen to. Malik's a character.
Yeah, absolutely, he is. And just even backstage whilst we are chopping it up with him, I was like, this guy, yes. Yes. It was needed. It was necessary. So, okay, so let's get to the big, gigantic Dumbo elephant in the room. And that's the ongoing legal dispute between the Miami resident and Formula One leading up to the upcoming race next week. So, Malik, could you kindly give us like a background into what you do and also explain to the listeners what's happening down in Miami?
Okay. Well, I guess to narrow it early on, we got plenty of time, but to narrow it earlier on, is Formula One is desirous of having many more races here in the U.S. By doing that, Formula One has decided that instead of making the cities pay for the opportunity to host, Formula One has put up the money. Now, Miami is an extremely, I think at one time it was considered the most segregated metro city in the country. I think it's one of the suburbs is actually still number two, just generally in the country. And of course, we probably got about 10,000, small cities and stuff. But basically what happened is when they first presented it, they wanted to have it downtown. Downtown is, downtown Miami, highway, normal buildings, kind of like a Singapore type situation. They wanted to have a street race. The business community and I'll just say the indigenous Miami community. I'll just say that to be PC right now. That will stop at some point. You'll realize it. But the indigenous Miami community, downtown Miami community, complained about it. They didn't complain a whole lot, but they complained a little bit, and that's all it typically takes down there. And so they decided to go to their go-to, which was to move it about 15, 16 miles to the north to a town called Miami Gardens. Still says Miami in the name, so I guess that's close enough. Miami Gardens is a historically Black community. It's one of those communities where if you are a person of color and a person of extreme color, I'll say that. Again, I'm still staying PC. And you are looking for a house, your real estate agent, without even asking, might just take you over there because why wouldn't you feel more comfortable with people who look just like you? We've been doing this forever. So it's one of those types of towns. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the other stuff as far as like gentrification and everything, but they decided to put the race there. Historically, when the city of Miami places things in towns like this, and it's not just Miami, this is an American thing and maybe other countries as well, but when they do that, typically the local community seeks or sees no financial benefit from it, and they don't care anyway. So tired of being kicked around, the city decided to try to fight back. They filed a federal civil rights lawsuit last year. Fairly quickly was dismissed. I mean, and civil rights cases don't typically go very far in the U.S. anyway, so that one was kind of doomed and destined to fail upon filing. So then they took a different tack. They decided to challenge the event permit. And so in this particular case and situation, they used the reason that noise pollution and some of the other things simply because we've got different ordinances that normally applies to the people who live within the community. But that was shot down this week also. And so at this particular point, it looks as if it may go on, but the city and the residents and some of their advocates and everything are still trying to fight. And the bad part is if Formula One, the city, the promoters just simply engaged with the community, even asked, and maybe even brought them in, we probably wouldn't even be in this situation. Tons of Formula One fans that live in the town. I'm sure there's tons of Lewis Hamilton fans and everything, but on paper, it says it's 70% Black people, and Black people here is just anybody darker hued. It's very Haitian, Black American, Jamaican, Caribbean community. But they just decided that we're just going to put a fake track in there, but we're going to build it and modify it to where it looks just like the part of town that it's not. And there's where the lie is. So it's like you're building a lie in an area and you're forcing people to stomach it. So that's where we are, I guess, in as much of a nutshell. Remember, I'm an attorney, so I can talk. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, Malik. Well, thank you for that, because that was a really insightful tidbit into it. And just, as an outsider looking in, with us being from Europe and looking into the situation, it is disheartening. And I think it is very frustrating that obviously the residents and, the local people within the area weren't consulted throughout the entire planning procedures of this event. To me, I definitely see that there is a legal ground, because of course, if you're going to take something like a race where you've got noisy F1 cars over 90 decibels and you've got residential houses not too far or immediately within the area or circumference of the circuit, how they would be affected as well. And it's really frustrating just on outside to see that. But Malik, what I wanted to put forward to you is what would have been a better outcome, and how would it have improved maybe the relations between the people and F1 organizers ultimately, if they were looking to try and achieve something here?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, that's hard. That's a hard answer. If we would have been in court, that would have been objected to on speculation grounds, because the issue, the genesis of the issue has zero to do with this race. It has nothing to do with Formula One. Okay. It has everything to do with the culture and the history of this particular area. Okay. I mean, and a lot of it has to do with the history of the United States. But I guess just narrowing it down, there's nothing that substitutes communication, obviously. If you communicate with the people in a particular area, you involve them in a particular area, in a particular endeavor, then especially with communities that are typically ignored, then you might get some, cooperation. Like I said, I practice law, but I'm also I run a healthcare company. The healthcare company that we have, it's open for everyone. Anyone and everyone can use it as a telehealth platform. However, we make it a point to deliberately market towards those unmarketed to those underserved communities, primarily because no one ever does. And so they typically feel left out all the time. You see what I'm saying? So we make it a point to focus much more of our marketing towards them to make them feel more invited. Oddly enough, all of those people look like me. So I'm familiar with the fact that they're never marketed to. So down here, you have whole communities that are left out. When you look at most of the Miami marketing for people, for tourism and stuff, they deliberately cut out those neighborhoods in their communities, but they're essentially neighborhoods. So, it's like a Chelsea or a Tottenham or whatever. I would assume it's kind of the same kind of situation. they'll deliberately start from the town, because our towns are I posted it on Twitter a couple of days ago when I had my long thread about it. They'll cut the first town that's a majority black town. Everything south of that, that's Miami. Everything north of that is, I guess, the phone booth from Doctor Who. You never know where you're going to be. And so they don't talk about it. It doesn't exist. And there are 3 of those towns, Opelika, Hialeah, and then Miami Gardens, between Miami. And, that's a lot of distance, So if they just consult with the people, I would have been happy to call it the Miami Gardens GP. You know what I'm saying? The AMG GP, who knows? But I mean, if you did that, if Formula One came in and engaged with the people there in a way that they could take some ownership for the race, use your biggest draw, who's the first and only, black driver ever, and you might then get some cooperation. But they never made that attempt because, and maybe they don't have the experience with that, but everyone in Miami does or would. But they, just decided to not do that. And so now that you've created a rift that's pretty impossible to repair. And they're going to be doing this potentially for 10 years. So you're stuffing something down these people's throat for 10 years that the year before they didn't want. It's a little bit, it's like the worst broccoli or Brussels sprouts that you give to a kid and say, here, this is rotten Brussels sprouts or broccoli, but eat it anyway. Of course. Now, on a good day, you didn't want Brussels sprouts or broccoli anyway. So, so that's what it's all about.
Well, I definitely echo your sentiments there, Malik, because communication is key. And of course, like you've mentioned as well, if they had gone about it in a more dignified and graceful way, I think that there would have been more harmony and things would have been more genuine. But like how you've mentioned, they've just kind of done it for their own benefit, for their own gain, it seems. And they haven't had that input, which is really embarrassing on their behalf and frustrating. But just to kind of structure this interview as well, I want you to know as well that this isn't from me. I'm just going to put on, I didn't want to say devil's advocate because I like the devil. So I'm going to put on my best Bernie Eccleston impression in a second. And then I got a bigger question after that.
Please
and
don't.
Then,
Please.
And then after that, I want to bring F1blag into this too, because I don't want him to be forgotten about. His presence equally as important. So let me actually get on with the Bernie Eccleston question before the bigger one. So, all right then, Malik. I'm Bernie Eccleston, and I bloody believe that the people from this community that they have the American football there, and the Miami Dolphins or the Miami Porpoises or something like that. So ignorant, old middle-aged guy like me with my privilege, like why is the F1 such a big deal, and these other like events being held in the area not an issue? That was Bernie Eccleston, by the way.
Okay. Well, the first thing that I would say is, Mr. Eccleston, can I please have some money? That would be the first thing that I would say. That might be the second or third thing that I would say. The fourth thing that I would say is they complained about those as well. Okay. See, the Hard Rock Stadium, I believe it's been there for about, they changed the name, obviously, but that stadium's been there for about 40 years. When they were breaking ground on that stadium, the same issue, that how that stadium got there, it got there the exact same way that I believe there's like a racetrack that's over there also. It got, so it was forced on the people that are down there. That's basically when a lot of this stuff started to this extent. So when I was saying that, if I had to narrow it down, I'm narrowing it down to this particular situation. Now, this has been a decades-long issue. Whenever you cannot put anything in any of the other places, they force it upon this area. I know before we came on, we were having the conversation about, different just gentrification methods, and they'll go in and try to devalue the properties and then maybe pay off a couple people. Here in the U.S., we have, obviously we have our Constitution. Our Fifth Amendment basically talks about, good Lord, just because we're talking about, I can't think of the term, but basically you have to pay the people the, fair and equitable value of something that you're trying to take away. But here they've come up with plans. They've devised a scheme on how to not have to do it. And so by doing that, then you take away the properties, get them for free, package them together, and then you sell them off to gazillionaires to build stadiums and stuff like that. And Miami Gardens is one of those communities that they do that to. And there's tons of them up and down all Black communities here in Florida, for the most part, in most parts of the U.S. But nearly every sports stadium that's built anywhere is built the exact same way everywhere. It's not just here. But so that's how they'll do that. So Mr. Eccleston, if you're not going to give me any money, then just take this. It's not just a sports stadium. In fact, David Beckham's doing it right now. We can probably get into that later, but he's doing that in Overtown. And Overtown is a town exactly like Miami Gardens. You know, being a Liverpool fan, I have no problem crapping on him. But because I think he's extremely overrated. But, you know, I'm supposed to because I'm a Liverpool guy. But he's doing the exact same thing because that's what you do here.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm
so,
glad that, sorry to cut you there, Malik. And I'm glad that you touched on that as well, because there is a kind of perception out there from probably that are less informed that, oh, this is just like a money grab, or people are just like trying to take this as an opportunity to just like, you know, make a scene out of nothing. When actually, if you really go back to the roots and you understand the crux and the history of what's going on, that this is something that's been going on for quite some time. And understandably, when you have, there's a good old like Caribbean saying, pressure does bust pipe, in terms of when you have something that's not going right, and then people are being ignored and suppressed, their rights are being infringed upon, and ultimately it's all being done in the name of capital gains, then of course people are going to get angrier and angrier, more frustrated, more like, you know, dissolved with the issue. And you could understand it, which I think is a beautiful segue into big crescendo, which I wanted to get into, Malik, is there is definitely a racial undertone to what's arisen out of this dispute. And I think it's important, you know, that we discuss this, because there's a lot of people out there that come from a place of privilege and they don't get the Black experience. So I really do want to delve into this further with you, Malik. And what would you say to those people? Because it's a similar type of question, but more just generally in relation to how the way they've gone about planning this Grand Prix. And we had this discussion too. Just because they haven't used the N-word, or not because they have slaves building the track, does that mean it's not racist? Racism can take part in hundreds of different facets, and it can be conducted in different ways. So I want you to absolutely go gun-ho with your explanation on this one.
Okay. Well, so you're basically saying, how do I put it into a digestible bite for people who typically cannot identify with this particular type of problem? That's basically the question you're asking me?
Amen, sir.
Okay. Well, see, that's hard because, as it's really a, good Lord, man, I talk all day and you actually shut me up with that one.
I have a knack of doing that.
and I'm trying not to cuss because I cuss like Betty White's barber. But good Lord. I'll just say this. F1, I'll be fairly PC. F1 is a European sport. The people who run it are Europeans. It is essentially made for Europeans. And I'm not saying that in a racial connotation, but I mean, there's a distinctive way of doing things in Europe versus South America, continentally and stuff like that. And most Europeans' exposure with people of color is directly linked to their involvement in colonialism, just generally, right? You go to Belgium, you're not going to find a lot of Black Americans. You're going to find a lot of Congolese, right? You go to the UK, you're going to find a lot of Nigerians, Caribbeans, Africans, generally everywhere that, the British have been. And then, what's funny is, after they got their independence, or granted, or however you want to phrase it, the independence, the people back in UK typically wanted nothing to do with, the Indian folks or Ghanaians or whatever that might be in the UK, because, we gave you your country, why don't you go ahead and go back? And they turned their nose at anybody and everybody else, as opposed to engaging with the enrichment that they brought, right? Forced or otherwise. Add a couple hundred years, now you've got these different communities that just happen to be in different places, regardless of how they got there. Here in the US, Black people, we all got here because of the British, right? It wasn't the Americans that brought us here, it was the British that brought us here, right? And, because they didn't want to have their slavery in the UK, they had it everywhere else. But then they tried to disavow that and act as if, it didn't happen there. But those of us who are descendants of that, we understand that. We live in two different places. The way that things occur and the cultures that evolve from that, they evolve locally. Just like I can't tell anybody from London how things happen in London. Mm-hmm. And so people in, say, the Netherlands or Germany, they can't identify with the lingering effects of what they did when they came to a particular place and disrupted everything else. And so at that point, and then plus there, the home society tends to think, oh, well, we gave them their freedom or their independence or whatever. So they're probably happy because, they have their own thing like we do, notwithstanding the problems that we left everyone with or the interference that we're continuing to maintain. And so whenever a European in the Netherlands or the UK, maybe not so much the UK because people there should know, they just decide not to. But say a Germany, Namibia is a little different. It's a little bit different than say the UK. But the Netherlands, they shouldn't either. But anyway, they'll look at this issue and this problem and think, well, I don't know. My friendship base, my family base is non-diverse. I can't relate with any of the things that are going on over there. And I don't have any experience in any of that stuff because it doesn't happen here. Why are those people always bringing up this issue and making it a racial issue and yada, yada, yada. And then you got the internet and, normal progression and stuff. So people cannot identify or relate. All the communication methods that we have and people still don't use them to learn anything. And so when you have an issue like what's going on down in Miami Gardens, it's easy for people to ignore it and think that it's just something different, or it's just Black people complaining about something, or it's just, minimize it to, you guys are really complaining about the noise. I mean, it's Formula One. Of course the cars are going to be loud. Luckily, it's not the V10s from a bunch of years ago that we all wish were still back, right? And so people will minimize it to that when that's not what it is. You know what I'm saying? And, it depends on the people, but it's hard to get those folks to understand if they're living their very, very insular, secluded lives that they're living in whatever country that they have. They might know Black people from the movies or Kobe Bryant or that's a Rush Hour joke, but from just from TV or whatever. Like even in the UK, like Liverpool's my team, but I mean, Liverpool was the last team to diversify itself in the Premier League or not Premier League, but in the top flight for the most part, right? It wasn't done until 81 or 82. And so they're, the Boston Red Sox, oddly enough, they're owned by the same guys of, the English football. And so it's that kind of thing. I mean, the people in different places, they can't identify, they can't relate, they can hear something, they can think that it's abhorrent that racism exists or that this problem has a racial overtone or undertone to it. But they probably don't recognize or realize that most of the stuff that they do day to day is almost the same thing, down to where they live, what school they went to, what school their parents put them in, and all this other stuff. So they're living that same extension of what the people here are going through, right? So, and that's the connection between all of us. Like the reason why their school was built was probably because a couple hundred years ago, they got some money from a slave down here. And so it's stuff like that. And if people can't understand the connection to it, then it's easy for them to just disregard it. So that was extremely long-winded. That was actually very PC. I don't think I dropped a single F-bomb in there, even though I wanted to, but hopefully that made sense. I'd try to tie it up at the end, but that's the disheartening part is, you've got a guy from Italy, who, in Italian society is, a little different sometimes, but they can't relate to you know, Black community in Memphis that's going through it. You know what I'm saying? Their idea of going through it is completely different than other people's ideas of going through it. It's all relative, of course.
Sure.
But, you know, the society is a little bit more homogenous there, right? You know, other than the guy that does the whole with his hands out, the KB or whatever his name is, he's pretty popular. But, you know, so people can't relate. Even in the UK, it's the same thing. You know, I don't know to what to the grand extent. You guys would know way more than me, but there's probably parts of the country where there are no Black people or no Indian people or no, you know, Desi folks or Asian folks, and so people are allowed to have preconceived notions. Brighton, you know, they're allowed to have these preconceived notions, and no one's able to challenge them, and so it's that kind of stuff that allows these types of things, or Europeans, in this particular case, because it's the sport, to not care and challenge it. This would be something that I think regardless of, you know, F1 Twitter and F1 fan bases are extremely toxic, especially in the last year. And it's actually been kind of hilarious. But this should be something that everyone should be behind to support the residents. Publicly, everyone's against racism. Privately, probably more people could care less about it because it doesn't affect them.
Facts.
And that's the issue.
I think you're spot on there, honestly, Malik. I think you've worded it, and just the way that you've explained that. If you don't understand that, I think you need to go back to school, because Malik was dropping bars there, and it's just facts. It's straight facts, straight to the core. So I think that definitely answers my question. And whilst I want to integrate him in, I'm gonna hand over to F1blag as well and let him answer or ask some questions as well, in relation to some of the stuff we've heard so far.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean that's moving. I mean, as someone that's mixed race in the UK, I can relate to some of that, and it probably links to what I'm struggling to understand about the Miami Grand Prix. It feels like racism is its most potent when there is, you know, someone in power can use their discretion, and they can either use it to favor someone or they can use it against someone. So, you know, when I was trying to read the story, and Malik, we came across each other. I saw your thread and interacted with it long before I knew that you'd be on the show. So I was excited to be here. When I looked at the story in the Miami Herald, it just seemed like the law was really clear that, you know, the noise level should not disturb the residents. But then all of a sudden, the judge says, you can put some earplugs in and get on with it, or they built a wall. Yeah. So, I mean,
that was very, wasn't it? Did you read that the same way that I did?
Yeah, but
that's how we take it.
But isn't, like, this is what I want to ask you. Like, the law is the law, surely. So, you know, if the law says, and I want to get the quote because, like, it's so clear, like, what the law says. It says it shouldn't unreasonably disturb the peace and comfort of residences. Like, so basically, Formula One cars going past your front garden, that's going to do that. So on what grounds can a judge then turn around and say, put your earplugs in, and then the city officials say, if you don't like it, then there's an election and you can vote this person out? It just seems like they're using their discretion against the people. What do you, from a legal perspective, like, link that to racism? How does that make sense?
Man, okay. Well, some of that I can answer because I still practice out here. Some of it I can answer, some of it I cannot. Because there's a very strong possibility that I might actually find myself in front of that judge. Let's see. Well, from I guess the basis of your question has the answer in the question, essentially. You're basically talking about the inconsistency. You know, a law is a law is a law. It is objective. An affirmative defense are, you know, that's basically something that gives you an excuse as to why you broke the law, but why was it, you know, necessary and should be, you know, given an excuse. And it sounds like what the judge gave as part of his reasons to rule against it would have been something that a person who was found guilty would have said, and it would not have worked, right? Like, hey, I was driving through the neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning, blasting my music, revving my engine. If I woke everybody up, they could have just gone back to sleep and put headphones on and earplugs in their ears, and they wouldn't have heard me, right? Normally that shouldn't fly. But I mean, just tell me that you're not interpreting that the same way.
Yeah, but I'm just laughing because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but we deal, and I'm saying we as in people, not we as in, an attorney type folk. We as the community that has things, placed upon them. I'll say that. I'm really working on my PC here and trying not to cuss, but there is no consistency. The consistency is it depends on who the party is, where they are, and the whole issue of voting. Look, I stopped voting. There's some people that believe in it, and in some places it's definitely beneficial. But here, it's almost like, in an emergency situation, I could go to the place right across the way, or I could wait for this new hospital to be built because all the doctors at the place across the street suck. And I'm sure the new ones at the new one that's going to be built are going to be better. I need help now, right? And so it's inconsistent. It's inconsistent everywhere. It should be black and white. But when you're dealing with, I'll just say that judges and attorneys and politicians and everybody else, they're all random samples of the exact same community that's doing and living the exact same discriminatory, non-discriminatory way, right? So it's unreasonable to assume that just because a person wears a robe or has a particular job, that they're going to behave any differently than the normal community or culture, prevailing local culture is going to exist. If the local culture tends to do that to people, there's zero reason, especially down here, to assume that they're not going to do it, in a legal situation, whether it's fair or not.
No, thanks. And I'll ask one more question and then hand back to Denzel. And I think you were right to say this isn't just about noise. That the noise is the playing field that the residents are playing on, because it's an opportunity to use the system to secure something that they should have already had, which is their own voice. So the thing I was like, I just couldn't understand. And me, I look for the receipts, I look for the numbers and what's written down. Last year, they had a judgment against them, the residents, that said, even though Miami Gardens is 70% black, that alone, moving the race
doesn't make it a racial issue.
Doesn't make it. Yeah, I mean, what I want to understand here is, like, in the UK, since something like 2010, we've had a law that says if you're a public body, it's your responsibility to think about whether what you do has an indirect or direct discriminatory impact, right? Is that the case in the US, or is it not? Because you're moving it from an area that is not 70% black to an area that's 70% black with no consultation. They don't want it, and then the judge is like, no, it's not enough to show it's discriminatory.
Well, again, I really have to maneuver this. I had trial earlier today, so I was thinking it was going to go long. Luckily, we got out about an hour before. So, oh man, yeah. So first of all, if you file a race or racial discrimination lawsuit in the districts of Florida, and for the most parts of the U.S., you're going to lose upon filing. You just are. We've got constitutional amendments and laws that are supposed to be there to protect certain communities who have historically been either left out or left behind. However, in certain areas, this being one of them, they're ignored to the point where you might as well not even file anything. I actually even questioned that the demographic data that says that Miami Gardens is 70% black. Because it's been 150% black every time I've gone down there. So maybe they moved in a couple of folks when the census folks were down. Or maybe they were shopping, 30% of them were shopping. Miami Gardens, and again, Miami Gardens is a dope town. Okay. It doesn't have the money that some of the other communities around here have, but it's one of those communities that's old, and we've just got to make do because that's the culture in this area. Like the entirety of this area is completely segregated. But yeah, how they could make that ruling, it's the same ruling for everything. It's the same ruling that got the stadium in there, same ruling that got the racetrack in there, same ruling that got the landfill at one point. And then, those are the places where they dump chemicals and all this other stuff. And community never has a say, and it's not, like I said, they had an opportunity to communicate this and have the people on board with it. And how sometimes you have the race and they'll do the little segment about the local community and all this other stuff. They could have very easily had that. It probably would have been a bunch of cookouts and everything and backyard fights and stuff, because that's the area like Kimbo comes from. But they didn't, and they won't, and they never tried to, because they don't engage with the folks down there. That's just one of those places where you put stuff. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that it's 70% black, they're probably like 70% black. We've done worse with more. So, yeah, that that was destined to be the answer. And I believe that, and the bad part is the people here believe in the process. And so it's disheartening when you believe in the process over and over again. It's structured to be fair and equal, but then when you go in, you get every single result but fair and equal. But they just keep doing it. They keep doing it, and they say, yeah, vote for this next person. Okay, well, they voted out another person to be able to get this in there. You know what I mean? Because the first time they couldn't. So, it's stacked against the people, and it's like that everywhere. So at that point, and that's the local community and the local community government doing that. Again, my problem is F1 is siding with those people that would do that. To the best of my knowledge, this kind of issue doesn't exist anywhere else. This is the only place, right? And so, unless there was something, say like Kyalami when it was first built or something like that, but I don't think so, because Kyalami's been there for a while. But this is the first time anything like this has ever happened, and the fact that Formula One is siding with this. We're not even going to apply for our event permit because we don't want to give them the amount of time to be able to challenge it. But we're going to build all the other stuff technically, I wouldn't say illegally, but without the expectation that the event is actually going to take place. We're going to apply for it at the very last second so that no one can then file something to stop it. That's collusion in the discrimination. That's the problem that I have, right? And, I don't know if it's an F1 thing. I don't know if it's an FIA thing. Obviously everybody's going to get money out of that deal, but that's, I don't expect anything less from Miami. I would, in this particular situation, expect more from F1. Kind of. I mean, after last year, who knows? But you know what I'm saying? That's the difference for me.
I think that was a really great response. I'm gonna pick up from F1blag here, and yeah, it definitely gives us insight more into just what's going on, how that racial element plays in, and again, it just highlights just how terrible the organizers and how F1 just on the whole have handled the whole situation. Because, like you mentioned as well, Malik, if they had just done it the correct way, I don't think everyone would have been so mad, but you can clearly see the cause of concern here when they've just rocked up and just done this whole thing without any regards to the residents as well. It's super disrespectful. But that in a way, I think, is a good segue to the next segment I have. So this is actually a fan question we've got from Molly, which is at Molly FS44. Thank you, Molly, for tuning in and for sending us this question for this episode. Molly's asked, or she said, let me paraphrase what she said. She said, yes, can't wait for this, which we love to see. But then she's also said, I would like to hear what the three of you think the right, and she's put right in asterisks, right on her, way is to launch a street race in Miami or any new city. How could F1 create new street races in a way that's equitable and fair to local residents? So actually, I'll chuck it to F1blag first. What are you saying about this question? How would you go about it if you were the organizer for a race?
What, setting up a race from scratch?
Yeah. And how would you get through? I think the crux of this question is making it an equitable and fair way to the local residents.
It's difficult because I think Formula One is inherently not an equitable sport. And if I'm going to be salty, it's definitely not a fair one. But I mean, so it's hard work. And when you think about Formula One, a lot of the new races, okay, Miami and Las Vegas are exceptions. A lot of the new races have been in kind of developing countries. So that adds another dimension. I think, honestly, a lot of it comes down to money. Like, so, of course, if people absolutely don't want a race in their area, then no amount of money should, fix that. But I bet if you look at how the money is breaking down for the Miami GP, how much of that is going to go to the community? From what I could read, very little, particularly in Malik's thread. So look, I think it's about, clearly there'll be a marketing reason why you'll want to go to a particular new country, new venue. Then when you decide on the venue, it's about, before deciding, making sure that the community is on board. And then it's about, as I say, if we know that Formula One generates billions of pounds, so where is that money for the community? And if you're putting it in an area that is particularly vulnerable or impoverished, the community have to see results, and it can't be, oh, well, we'll do something in 10 years. They have to be instant results. So that's how I do it. It would be about listening. It would be about only selecting in an area that people wanted it. And then it would be about flowing huge commercial gains from a race into the people that live there.
Perfect, F1blag. And Malik, I'm going to put forward the same question to you. And I know you've kind of touched on it already just with some of the great answers you've given us. But if you had to create a new street race in a way that's equitable and fair to local residents, how would you go about doing that?
Let's see here. A street race. Well, if I'm only using, let's say, a Miami Gardens by itself. In fact, you know what? Let's use Vegas for an example. Okay, Vegas is essentially downtown, and I believe I used to live in Vegas when I was a kid. We were out at Nellis. I'm not 100% sure exactly what street because it's just kind of a crooked oval, basically. But in those particular situations, I would think that a lot of the businesses and those stockholders in that particular community should not necessarily have a greater stake in what happens as it relates to the race, but like what my man was touching on, you put a local person in charge of some of the like sponsorships, or you make sure that a certain percentage of the local businesses have a prominent placement. We're talking about street race. So the prominent placement during the race, obviously they don't sell toasters in Formula One, right? So the cars aren't stripped bare. They have sponsors and stuff. So I think if you're doing the street race, then you are allow some of the let's just go back to Miami Gardens. You allow some of the local businesses to have a much more prominent advertisement. You have a consortium of local business people and maybe the event organizers and local government folks. You have, equal representation, and they put all of that stuff together. You hire a person that is much more local, kind of like an interior designer type or a caterer type that typically knows the area, knows how, have that person be in charge of certain aspects. You integrate local members of the community. Now, the problem ends up being, what exactly is local? Is Miami the local, or is Miami Gardens the local? Therein lies the problem, because Miami is assuming, for the purposes of this race, that it's the community, when in actuality, it's 15, 16 miles away. 2 or 3 major, and I wouldn't say major, but good sized cities and communities away. Miami Gardens has no input. Their businesses aren't going to benefit financially, because Formula One and the city of Miami, like the Hard Rock Cafe, not Hard Rock Cafe, the Hard Rock Hotel that's associated and attached to that stadium is 7 miles away. The people that are going to that race to stay at the Hard Rock are nowhere near the stadium. You know what I'm saying? And so the local community hotels, and they're small, but they're not a part of any of the normal advertisements. So you say, okay, well, a certain number of those have to be a part of the programming. So you ingratiate and you integrate some of the local community people, the stockholders and whatnot, and that's how you do it. But again, like I said, the problem that you end up having is you start to, who is the community that you're talking about? There we have the problem, because is it Miami Gardens, or is it Miami, the community? The guy who built the Hard Rock Stadium, he has it out in Miami Gardens. It's the Miami Dolphins. That's not Miami. They don't play in Miami. It'd be like Anfield being in Tottenham. He's got a satellite stadium. So that's to me, that's how I would do it. And because it's Formula One. If it was a different kind of racing, I'd say you can't have the race at a place that doesn't have a privateer team. I mean, I could get deep in the weeds with that question, but for Formula One, I would do it that way.
I think that's a great answer, and just because I'll go as well with my answer. I think the key takeaways from that really is integration and involvement. The two eyes, we all have two eyes, I like to think, but essentially, yeah, it's about integration. It's about making sure that when these event holders and organizers get their planning permits to host these events, they take into account the planning conditions are complied with the local residents and the neighborhood plan and the stakeholders, and that they take feedback from the community. And when we say community, we don't just mean the high up guys that own the businesses, or the huge conglomerates. We mean the people as well, the residents, the commuters, and those that are affected. Their livelihoods are affected within the vicinity of these events as well, because they're equally as important, if not even more integral to it. And
Bro,
then if you talk
you've
about
got a 10-year relationship. How do you not
exactly,
do that? Right?
exactly.
How do you not do that? Good Lord, 10 years. Like, if my kid was born today and I get a hookup for 10 years, how much better are things going to be by the 6th and 7th year?
True. It
You know
would
what
be
I'm
very
saying?
solid. Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
Lord. I mean, that's the frustrating part. And it happens everywhere. I didn't mean to cut into your field, but I'm
No, it's
just
fine.
like, that's you have to look at the entirety of the contract. That's 10 damn years. I had to. Sorry. 49 minutes in, I had to reach my limit. I got to throw some kind of cuss word out. But it's 10 damn years, bro. And you're starting off you're not even starting off on the wrong foot. You're starting off on an amputated leg. Good Lord. So my bad.
Absolutely. No, it's fine, Malik. And I echo your frustrations there as well, because it's the truth. Just like, how could you be so selfish? Or it's almost like the organizers and the FIA and F1, they've just gone into this event with the blinkers on, and they realize that, there are some ongoing social issues, and they've just completely turned a blind eye to it and just said, well, money talks, and it will talk loud enough to get us out of trouble, as it always does. And I think that is something, if we continue to use our voices and we continue to educate people and have these conversations as we're having today, they won't be able to get away with it much longer, because people will then start to understand the truth and they'll see the lie behind the veil, which is so key. So I think that was a really great question put forward by Molly. Make sure you follow Molly at Molly
Shout out to Molly.
MS44. She's the best. And moving on to the next segment, we got some questions from obviously the boss lady, obviously Georgina Donna herself. She wanted to put these forward to you as well, Malik. First question she's asked us, and I think she's just leaning more now on like just your field and your expertise, not necessarily just in relation to the Miami Gardens event that we have, but just from a contract law point of view. Her question was, why was the Spa race not cancelled in 2021? So again, this for the viewers at home to give context. Again, this is one of those funny scenarios where, like, there's a race, human nature's happened, and it's basically like a horrendous. You couldn't even call it a race. It was cars trundling behind the safety cars. They woefully aquaplaned, behind it. But essentially, certain things were done probably to shortchange the fans, and that's where I'm going to leave it because I want Malik to just explain the legal side of it and also just how that could be right.
Good Lord. Well, I will say the lawyerly thing, which was I do not have privity of the contract that they would have had to be able to fully and adequately answer that. However, if you've got a pile of money standing in front of you and nobody looking, are you going to pick it up and walk off with it, knowing full well you're going to be able to get away with it? That answers the question. I mean, you're not going to let a little bit of rain get in the way of the bag, right? So that's the answer. I mean, and then they had to justify trying to tweak whatever rule and, doing the whole 2-lap thing and all that other stuff. I mean, it's kind of like, a bunch of years ago with the time limit, like a race isn't complete until the time limit and all that stuff. So, no, I mean, you went through you went through the entirety of the weekend and you got paid through the entirety of the weekend. And then you've got to the race and everybody's there and it's a sellout potentially or whatever the case might be. And you've got all this other stuff. Maybe there was a force majeure clause or something, which is, an act of God or some kind of unforeseen incident would have canceled, some of the obligations. And so they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. So we do this little farce of a race and collect the bag, and, Lewis Hamilton, when he made his statement, when he said, look, I think all of those people that showed up should have gotten their money back. To me, that was when all the stuff that happened at the end of 2021, I think calling out F1, everything started going in the reverse for him at that point. I think that was actually him calling them out was when, to me, I still think there was a major fix. I think a lot of us do. But I think that was actually the triggering event, was basically calling F1 thieves for what they did. And from that point forward, he got 0 calls. And so, in fact, they were making up because he got a traveling. That's not even in Formula One. So, well, I guess technically it is. But, yeah, so, no, it was just cash.
Cash is king. Cash is king.
Cash rules everything around me. So
Cream, get the dollar.
That's what it was. That's right. I mean, euro, y'all, I guess. So that's what it was.
Great little Wu-Tang reference there as well. I love that.
Hey, sometimes you gotta do it.
Of course.
I might be 47, but I wasn't 47 when it came out. So
you were young and ready to go, and still young in spirit, Malik. So no, I appreciate that, and I agree with your sentiments there as well. It was just so farcical for them to do that. But like you said, like, there's no shame. You can't put shame amongst the shameless. That's what ultimately comes down to. They had the opportunity to secure the bag. The fans are secondary, and making the money was primary for them in that scenario.
I mean, where the shame comes from is just, the result and the points and all the other stuff. I mean, you could have still probably tried to make it a weekend. We all saw videos of the guys, playing and doing slides and farting around out in the rain and stuff like that and having fun. Some of it was with the crowd who was still there because they were still expecting a race to continue. I mean, I still personally think that for this year, Spa should be free, honestly, as a makeup call. maybe not everybody can get in, or you get some kind of, I don't know how you RSVP a couple 100,000 people, but I just mean for like that Sunday race. I think that some kind of amends should be made, but that's free. What's that?
No, it doesn't exist. And you know what? It's funny because on this topic of like American races as well, I'm like, sure, you're probably watching the sport back then, F1blag. I can rely on you to remember this as well. Like, there have been incidents where, like, some random things happened and, some sort of justice was restored for the fans. And what I was referring to there is, I don't know if you guys can remember, I'm pretty sure it's the 2004 or 2005 US Grand Prix at
Indianapolis.
With the Michelin blowout gate. Like,
yep.
And again, F1blag, do you want to like explain to the viewers what that was? And I'll let Malik kind of say what were the ramifications for that after.
I mean, so I remember it like it was yesterday. I was doing my A levels. That will age you, and it will also make me feel very British. But basically, back in the day, we had two different tire manufacturers, and the way that they build the Indy 500 circuit, on which some of the Indianapolis Grand Prix was held, they kind of diamond cut some grooves into the track. And so Bridgestone tires were fine. And back then there were only three teams. So I think it was Ferrari, definitely, Jordan, and one other who I can't remember, maybe Minardi or someone like that.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And then Michelin couldn't handle the loads coming on the banked corner that had those grooves in it. So they did qualifying. And if I remember rightly, they did the formation lap for the race. And then I remember like David Coulthard on the radio or something saying, I want to race. And then basically everyone that had Michelin tires pulled into the pits, and their race was over before the race had begun. And then you had this weird picture where you can see Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello on the front row. Then some Jordans and Minardis several places back. And then the race was just 6 cars for felt like 2 hours or something.
It was Hamilton last year.
Yeah, it was exactly like the Hungarian Grand Prix. I mean,
right.
I before Malik, you get into that, and you talked about money and cash rules, everything around me. I was looking at like what happened after that, because, where does the money go? You've got a market. This is the funny thing. The F1 has been obsessed with breaking into the US market since, day one. And I looked at it and I was like, I wonder if those fans got a refund. And guess who offered the refund to the fans? It wasn't F1, because obviously they love their money, but it was Michelin.
Yep.
So their reputation had taken such a hit.
Yep.
They offered a refund, which is interesting. Money. It's all about money, because they're in F1 for marketing. I wonder how many Michelin tires were sold in the US after that.
Yeah, you don't see them on a lot of places anymore. Believe it or not. I mean, they come on BMWs, I think, and that's about it. And, you don't see that many. I mean, you see a lot of them. But, yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And then we'll bring it into another question that Georgina's asked. And again, I want to leave the Abu Dhabi bag to F1blag, because that's his bag, really. But what I would ask, and again, this is like from Georgina's viewing as well. She's asked Malik, why is it that the FIA don't have a court that's independent?
Oh man, why don't they? Well, let's see here. Well, I mean, I know it's based upon the overall structure. A lot of it has to do with a couple of different negotiations that were made upon formation. I know some of it has to do with I call it a consent decree, because essentially what it is, I know it's dealing with the EU when they had that issue of tampering. I think it was more the Max Mosley and Eccleston, trying to control every single aspect and interfering with some of the things as it related to the teams and their ability to market themselves. But it's just the FIA has maneuvered itself to be able to be the final authority for all motorsports on this planet. and it's almost as if there's a race, the FIA has some kind of jurisdiction. And being that the FIA has rules making jurisdiction, so to speak, then they're able to create the the court. And I know, like here in the U.S., for example, because U.S. people or U.S. organizations, companies, and stuff like that, they tend to be what is the word that I am searching for? Self-sufficient. That's not the word I want to say, but I'm just going to say that. And they don't look to the FIA, like NASCAR, for example. Okay, you just go around making left turns, dipping skull for about an hour and a half, and the FIA's tried to tell them all kinds of stuff over the years, and they're like, we don't care, Frenchie. That's just their attitude on it. So no, they just decided that we're going to be the final authority. We make all the rules. We're the ones that are the most able to interpret the rules, so we can do it. And should it be? No, but until there is a competing regulatory authority or body or something like that, then who's going to challenge it? You know what I'm saying? The FIA, up until maybe, again, notwithstanding Suzuka and Kyalami, historically, it's Europe. And it's always only worked, it's always been fine for there. There haven't been the issues and the problems. There haven't been any diversity and all this other kinds of stuff. So these kinds of, issues haven't really come up. Now that they've come up, do they need to have one? Yeah. The courts that they have are based about contracts. Now, you can take them to court for a contract relating to, advertisement or sponsorship, whatever the case might be. You could do that. But for motorsports related issues that are specifically about the four wheels hitting the ground, nope. FIA they got full jurisdiction on that. Until we have a FAI, something like that can compete with them to make it, to give people a choice. It's just going to be that way. And the thing about it is, a person is legally allowed to sign away their rights. Part of your admission to be able to participate in an FIA sanctioned race is you're signing away that right. So if you want to participate, you sign away that right. So contractually, you don't have the right to go to anyone else, but whatever, I wouldn't say regulatory authority, but, court or whatever jurisdictional kind of court that they set up for you, you have no choice but to go to whatever they give you. And, it is what it is. And I think that's kind of what we all kind of saw and experienced last year and noticed with the appeals. And, when Toto said, look, are they really going to rule against themselves? Because in the end, it's going to cost them money. No, of course not. Right? It's literally the exact same kind of situation that we're talking about as it relates to Miami Gardens. Are you going to go to the court in the city that stems to benefit from the part of the city where that race is going to benefit? It's unreasonable to think that you're going to find someone that's not going to rule in the best interest of themselves. And that's worldwide. That's not unique to anywhere. So we start watching swimming and, change our habits, maybe they'll do it. But until that's threatened, they have no reason to. That's almost like asking the FA to actually do something about racism from the crowd when, they're not even acknowledging that. It's just that one individual person. Oh, okay. Well, that person just is an anomaly, right? For the last 50 years. Now, there's obviously an ongoing problem. You have to address the ongoing problem. If you don't want to address the ongoing problem, expect it to happen again. So yeah, that's my very extremely long-winded answer.
No, well, it was a very extremely needed answer there, Malik, because a lot of people wanted to know. Obviously, we were very enraged by the result, which again, I'm just waiting to bring F1blag into that one because I'm sure he's got some questions pertaining to that segment as well. But a lot of us asking, why isn't this a thing? Why is it that the FIA can basically mark their homework? So that definitely gives it a lot more flesh on the bones, and I'm really thankful for you answering that. And then with that in mind, yeah, I'll hand it over to F1blag because I'm sure there's some other questions that you had to ask you, even in relation to that.
Yeah, I had 3 questions. And first of all, I would say, if you've ever worked with lawyers, you know that their absolute strength, other than just being, persuasive characters, is their like understanding of the precise meaning of words. And it sounds a bit boring, but actually, but
no, I hate attorneys. So I mean, you're not hurting my feelings. You say the worst thing you possibly can.
No,
please.
No, but there's a lot of power.
Pretty please.
If what I'm going to ask you is basically, there's a lot of money and liability tied up in getting the wording wrong, right? So if you make a statement that admits fault in certain situations, you could be sued, right?
Yep.
So going to the power of words, first question, which I don't expect you to kind of have a treatise on, is can any sometimes mean all?
Okay. I'm glad you just said what you just said as a preface. So in law, we have 2 different terms that mean 2 different things, and neither of them are ever used for what they're used for. We have shall and may. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Shall means must. May means might or maybe. Okay. So can any mean all? It depends on what the historical use for any is. Oh my gosh, man, that was dope. For an attorney, that actually was pretty dope. I'm getting ready to tear my rotator cuff, pat myself on the back for that one. Yeah, that was. You guys are probably like, really? That's it? But yeah, I used to teach it. I used to teach law also. So, yeah. So it depends on how the historical use of any is. Any, when I did that other thing when I was basically hating on everybody a few months ago, I looked through, not all because I read all day and reading sucks. You do it when you're a kid, you learn it, and then you stop trying to do it later. But I looked through a ton, and anybody else can go ahead and do this. Go through some of the sporting regs. It uses any as all, aside from any as being any, right? That's the historical use for it. So to me, any meant all. Any meant any in existence. That's how that's how it's used. Any that may be present. It's never used as any as in whichever ones you pick and choose, which is how it was used. Nowhere in any of the regs,
I see what you did there,
does it say that. It is used as any, because remember, we're talking about motorsports. So with motorsports, where it's about multiple parts and pieces. So any historically throughout the entirety that I saw, it meant any that may be in existence at that time for a person to make a decision about. That's it. And it encompassed all that may be in existence right there. So to me, long-winded again, that says all. If you want to narrow that down to all, but again, that's the difference between, say, plain English and that superfluous stuff, or you just writing how I talk. So the short answer is yeah, absolutely. All can mean any. It just depends on how historically it's used in whatever document that you're looking at.
I feel like we should go to like whatever university you've got in Miami. Claim credits, because I feel like we're getting our masters here in law. Right. 2 more questions, right? So the next one is, and this is a bit of a technical one, right? in Abu Dhabi, the steward said, oh, well, there is this article somewhere in the middle of the sporting regulations, 15.3, that if you interpret it in a certain way means that the race director could do whatever they want when it comes to the safety car. However, there are other articles and provisions in the sporting regulation that say exactly how you should use the safety car. And there is another one that was 48.12, and there's another one at the beginning that says you've got to pay attention to all of the provisions. So, I mean, you mentioned that reading sucks, and I tend to agree with you, unless it's a passion project like F1 for me. But
of course,
yeah. So when you look at the decision that they made, do they have a leg to stand on, or are they reaching?
They were reaching for a way to justify the wrong decision, but at the same time, keep their nose clean. So kind of like what you said a little while ago, language matters. How you phrase certain things absolutely matters. And at the same time, the results or outcomes also matter. If you've, and then you start dealing with obviously reputations and stuff like that, it is possible, again, not having privy or any of this other stuff and having, being a part of that group of community that's dealing with the stuff, it is possible that they may have opened themselves up to some other bid or point of litigation, maybe, some broadcasting thing if there's, if it ends in a certain way or the other way. Not, how a person wins, but just the outcome and how the performance ended up. I think when they did that in the way that they did that, I think they were trying to explain their decision to not decide. And again, getting back to the same explanation that I gave a second ago, if you've got an inconsistent ruling, then you go back to the historical use of whatever and however it is. I know everybody said, Massey the year before, he had said, well, I've got, there's something in the sporting regs that said that I have to let all the, all the cars unlap themselves. Therefore, that's why I did it. That was my understanding of it at the time. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily matter what his understanding of it is. But if his understanding of it at any time was congruent with everybody else's understanding of it every other time, then that's what that means. That should overrule everything in law. And of course, I'm an attorney here. We stole all of our stuff from the UK. So this is something that you guys should know more than me, because this is y'all's language, not mine. Tradition trumps stated law for the most part. If there's something that's always been done in a particular area, regardless of whether you've codified it, if another person ultimately does that action exactly the way that it's always been done, that essentially gives that person an excuse to continue to do it or to get away with doing it that one more time, even if there's a law that took into consideration everybody doing it a certain, not necessarily taking into consideration, but it's different from what the tradition is. You see what I'm saying? Tradition always trumps stated law for the most part. Now, the two converge here. Stated law and the tradition were always congruent. So the anomaly was what Massey did. Okay, well then, regardless of what the stewards say, or actually, I take it back. Well, the stewards were put in a weird position. I'm not speaking on their behalf because they all suck, but I think the way that they said what they said acknowledged the fact that there was a historical methodology of how the rule was applied. So I think that the way that they worded it was, not necessarily that particular thing, but other stuff. Stuff has always gone down this way, but it is possible, based upon the verbiage, that it could have been applied. We see how a person who's struggling to make this work could come to that conclusion. Okay. But it's always been done this way, therefore it's to be done that way. And if you have a problem with it, then you make a specific change that everybody is brought into, the historical method of doing it is brought into the light. Everyone is made aware of what the historical methodology is. And then we're all agreeing to make that change. Okay. What Formula One did this past year was we're going to change some of the verbiage to cement how we've always done what we've done. But we're still going to excuse that one misapplication because that's kind of what we wanted. You see what I'm saying? They didn't change anything. They changed the verbiage to make sure that the historical occurrence continues to occur the exact same way. We changed the any to the all, even though it's always been all.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, well, so that's what they did, and you only needed to do it just the one time, which was the one time that you needed to do it.
So, I feel like we're coming full circle, because when we were talking about Miami, we were saying, look, those in power will find a way to use their discretion either to favor someone or to kind of run against someone. And here, what I hear you saying is they found an explanation which, while probably wouldn't stand up in court, did enough for them to survive, which is probably what they need to do.
The tell was Horner almost immediately parroting what everyone else said later on down the line. It was, you know what I'm saying? He literally came out of right out of the chute. It doesn't say any. It says it doesn't say all. It says any. Okay, but we've never used it as any. Yeah, but that's just what it says. Okay, well, that's just like saying Hitler said the 400 times in his life. You said the. Are you a Nazi? You know what I'm saying? So it's like kind of gotcha type stuff. It's like, dude, you're reaching. And no one called out the reach.
I think what you say there about the tell, I think we all woke up a bit because, I've been watching the sport since I was a child. About a year ago, the commentator that they had in the UK, Murray Walker, died. And back in his day, you thought it's a sport. The commentator is independent. And then, they're watching a sport and they're narrating it to you. But I think last winter, when this happened, you suddenly learned who was on the payroll. And so many members of F1 media, and that's not me alleging anything. They are the broadcast partner of Formula One. It's contractual. It's just how it is.
I'll co-sign you.
Yeah. I mean, it's like WWF. You wouldn't go like Jim Ross is independent, when he's talking about Stone Cold. He's selling you the product. He's never going to say, oh, this match is terrible. He's going to tell you it's what they want to hear. So can I ask you a final question? And then I'll hand back, which is, look, we were talking in Georgina's very luxurious green room before the start of the podcast about some of the differences between the US, Sri Lanka, the UK. And one of the things we have this perception about the US is that it's a litigation culture. So maybe you've made some money from it. But what I mean by that is people, if something goes wrong or if they admit fault, then the lawsuit just turns up at your door immediately, right? So I'm trying to think about the FIA here. I was looking in preparation for this at their executive summary, which they did on the 18th of March, when they told us all about, we didn't quite follow the rules, but it was human error.
Right.
What's interesting to me is that what they tried to do is they tried to say, we made an error, but it was in good faith. To me, if I lost money because of something, if you made an error, why, that it doesn't matter if you did it by mistake, supposedly. Are they opening themselves up for action in future?
Maybe, but it depends on that explanation. I mean, that's like you going out and getting an insurance policy and you committing suicide with it. I don't know how it is out there, but if you commit suicide, sometimes they won't pay on because they assume, all right, well, no insurance company wants to pay on anything. But you commit suicide, then they might have a clause that says, okay, well, we're not going to pay out on a death benefit because clearly the reason why you got this insurance was so that you can commit suicide to get, to enrich your family. It sounds like that of the plethora of possible, bits of liability, financial liability, that if it's the same thing with the airlines, right? I mean, if a wing fell off while you're flying, they're going to try their damnedest to make sure that it was considered pilot error, right? And why is that? Because 300 other people went down with it, and if there was products liability or something like that issue with the plane, who's getting sued? The person with the biggest wallet. And so, yeah, Massey works for us, and yeah, Massey screwed up. He misapplied it in the way that he was supposed to misapply it. But it was a verbiage mistake. It wasn't on purpose. And so, no harm, no foul. And whatever bonuses probably that we were going to pay out to someone for reaching whatever benchmark or whatever the case might be, because we just want to get the season finished and not have to pay anymore, then that's what it is. So, Massey goofed. It's his fault. We'll make a couple of changes here and there to some stuff that really aren't changes. We just changed that any that's always been used as all to justify, to be in sync with the human error issue. And no harm, no foul. And we'll just keep everything the way that it is. And we'll work on the next year so we can get through all this stuff, because we run the possibility of losing a bunch of money one way or the other. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, like I was saying with Spa, I mean, it could have been like a force majeure type of issue. There might be, integrity clauses. You got sports players that, like here in the U.S., some of the NFL and baseball players, they can't ride motorcycles because if they get hurt, then they forfeit their contract. Or, what is the guy for United? Greenwood doing what he's doing. So the team might try to find a way to cancel his contract because of some action that he took. You know what I'm saying? So there's a bunch of stuff that plays into it. Manchester United will try to do all they can to distance themselves from that one particular incident and situation, so they don't lose any more money, right? The least amount of money that they lose is just the amount of money that they have to continue paying him. And then they're trying to, obviously limit that as well. So I think that has a lot to do with it. It's like the more you bring up the stuff and you talk about the stuff, the more you start to realize just how delusional most of us are for continuing to watch this stuff. But I mean, you just do your set of crunches, get your abs hard, and then just watch the race and just hope for the best. Shout out to Georgina, probably doing her little exercises right now. Do some crunches, lady. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all frustrating. But you try not to have. I mean, the whole point is, I guess for me, it's a little different, but the whole point of watching racing is to literally sit in front of the TV. If you're at home, sit in front of the TV, drool, walk around in your underwear with some Cheetos. I know you guys eat better than we do, but we eat a lot of Cheetos. So eat your Cheetos, and you have one sock on, and you just vegetate on the couch. But now you can't do that. You end up having to, like you said, take a university degree. It's like, is that correct? Because it seems like the person, you know what I'm saying? And, it just shouldn't be that way. It should just be somewhere where, low IQ entertainment, other than knowing, some of the science and everything. But we can't even do that now. You got to have a science degree and a law degree, and, it's too many ands.
So true. I definitely agree with those sentiments there as well. It's just one of those things where it really shouldn't be that way. We should just be able to enjoy the sport as a sport. But because these guys are so out of touch with reality, it's mind-blowing. And like you said, it opens your minds to see how much further work has to be done, which I think is a really great kind of transition into the next question. I'm actually going to open up to both of you guys. I'll give an example as well. What have you made about Liberty Media and FOM stance on equality and justice matters with, their like end racism campaign or we racist one campaign? Because another thing I wanted to draw an inference to, and whilst it's still on Netflix, I implore everybody to go and check it out. There was a Netflix series by a black NASCAR driver called Bubba Wallace. He has a series called The Race. It gives you a perspective of him as a black athlete in NASCAR, probably one of the most southern sports, and just how even in that sport, there's loads of racist, culture ingrained in the DNA of it from its inception in the South, and how, at some point, the co-organizers, the shareholders, everybody had to come together and say, well, there's this Confederate flag issue. There's been a thing where like the Confederate flag has its negative connotations and it has its reputation with a dark history and part of time. Maybe it's time for us to just completely ban that flag, because although there are a lot of fans, I say fans in inverted commas, fans that attend the races and they have this flag, it has no place in our society, and therefore we're going to take action by just completely outlawing it. And I thought that was a great example of them just saying, you know what, it's not about money, it's the principle. And, we're not going to just have this kind of issue just ongoing and just play deaf ears to it like, certain people have as well. So I'm going to just leave it there. I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on what like F1 is doing, on these social matters.
After you, sir.
I'll come in. I think I'll keep it short. What we learned over the winter is that people that run Formula One are largely out of touch, and particularly in communications, which is ironic because Liberty is like a mass communication empire. They are incompetent. So they don't understand, I think, reality. I think if you're in the F1 paddock, so they're a mix of people, right? There are Liberty people that have been parachuted in. Clearly, they've been on high-end salaries for a long time and in their own sort of golf club elite. Maybe I'm stereotyping, but, shoot me. Then you've got people that have been in the F1 paddock for years. And did you notice that anyone that kind of had a paddock pass was highly defensive about the FIA, highly defensive about Abu Dhabi? So then when it comes to race, when it comes to equality, when it comes to all sorts of social matters, these people, not only are they incompetent, but they just don't have the life experience or the proximity, in my view, to really understand, A, what the problems are, and then B, how to, proactively lead the charge to challenge and tackle those. So that's my answer. They're out of touch. They're incompetent. We see it on all facets of what they do. And so I don't expect them to do a good job on this, which is, for me, really important, as much as they don't do a good job of their basic job, which is running a racing series.
No true words were spoken there, F1. Malik, I just wanted to get your take on that as well. I'm sure you probably said what you were thinking, but in your own words, just what have you thought?
My man didn't put a word wrong. I mean, it's, communication. Communication companies are about doing whatever you can do to get the most number of eyes or bodies in. I mean, it's just like news channels, BBC, Sky, CNN over here. They all do the exact same stuff. They could care less about, in many cases, the end product is just getting the other, just getting people in. And, groups and companies like those, they deal with bottom line issues. Okay. Like, for example, in the US, because everything, like I said, everything here is racialized. The sport itself is very, very racialized. It probably not intentionally. It just ended up being, I think, I can't remember who had said it earlier, but it's a very, use you guys' word, posh kind of sport, right? Rich white boy sport. Okay. None of those guys would be caught dead sweating or running into somebody. They just jump into something and go around the track, right? Not, denigrating anybody that races, because I used to race motorcycles. But that's that's what they do. And so it's like, okay, well, what segment watches this segment? So we're going to market primarily to that segment. It would be great to get some of these other people in because that's just more money for us in the market, and we get more marketing dollars and the whole nine. But if we don't care. It's like the Republican Party. If we don't care. And so when you have like a title fight like we had last year and, Max fans and it, became very, very nationalistic and it became very tribal, a communication company loves that, right? Here in the US, I don't know about how it is out there, but our news channels are like that. Our MSNBC versus CNN versus Fox, that's how they approach informing us. So we ultimately end up being uninformed because all they do is they try to market towards a particular segment. Whereas with Formula One, they're like, okay, well, we may put an overture out, We Races One, and hopefully that will help. And it did a little bit because it gave the impression that they gave a shit, right? Sorry about that. I had to do it. Number two. But we soon realized that was nonsense very, very quickly. Why? Because none of that stuff, like we said earlier, affects any of those other people, right? None of it. So they just deal in numbers. This demo, 18 to 40 demo, just happens to be this, that, and the other. So we'll just continue to market over there, right? And so then when you start to think of stuff like that, then you start to, again, I'm an attorney, so we do a lot of investigation type stuff. And then the Derek Warwick kind of comments start to make sense because he's the great white hope. Well, who would say something like that? A communications company, a company that is hoping to grow, a base so that they can have more eyes and whatever to be able to look at. And perhaps that base was, diminishing because more Hamilton fans were being a lot more vocal, and Hamilton's fans tend to be a little bit more diverse and they don't buy as much stuff from the vendors and everything. So we need this guy because we can market to his fan demo. And so, you know what I'm saying? So then the dedication to the We Races One, the slogans and all this other stuff start to disappear. And then it's like, you know what? Let's start to ban and outlaw all of that stuff because the people that we can make more and more and more money from don't like that. So that's what we do. And, like Black said, I mean, they're not running the sport like a sport. They're running the sport like the East India Company, right? And so we'll put it all around the world and do all this other stuff and try to extract out as much as we can. And then when we can't, we'll probably sell it, which is like, the 99-year contract, for the FIA and Liberty Media. The reason why Liberty Media is even there is based upon that contract and that consent decree from, with the EU, right? And they retain that 1% interest with, from that thread that I did a couple months ago. So, yeah, I mean, that conversation, when Warwick says the great white hope, that's a conversation that a communications company would have had. Well, why would you have had that with that steward? And who are we having this issue with as it relates to 2021? The stewards and the decisions. And who benefited from all of that? F1, the sponsors. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, I mean, it's one of those things where, maybe it's just me because, that's just kind of how my mind works. And I'm not very conspiratorial and everything, but a lot of this stuff is just there. It's out in the open. You can see it. And, it starts to make you hate what's going on. Liberty Media sucks. But Liberty Media, to me, is a front. It's all it is. It's a front. And it is anyway. It's only, they're only going to have it for probably 6, 7, 8 years. Then they're going to sell it to another company for 6, 7, 8 years. And then they're going to sell it to another company. So they're just the guys who suck at the moment that we see. But I don't think Liberty Media is the people. I still think it's F1. I think Liberty Media is just that foil to abide by that EU consent decree. So, yeah, it is what it is. Capitalism.
At its finest, when you put it that way too. No, I agree with you on that one as well, Malik. It's just, yeah, it's like, how they just do these things essentially to just make sure that they fill their own pockets and that they, have enough bread for tomorrow, unfortunately. But yeah, it's crazy just how when you condense it like that, even when you look at other sports, like when I touched on the NASCAR thing, they even seem to be taking the right direction and like take
They're
more of
not.
a genuine.
They're not.
Are
They're
they
not.
not?
I guarantee you they're not. I mean, NASCAR has lost a ton of fans for that particular reason also, right? The whole Confederate, and I don't even think it's really a matter of the Confederate flag, because a lot of this stuff, like they started losing a lot of their fan base even when Danica Patrick started driving, right?
Oh.
They had a female driver, and they had an issue with that. They had an issue with, oh my gosh, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was an Arab guy. I think he started off in the truck series and then he went into the actual car series. They were having a problem with him just because he was an Arab. This was early 2000s. So, it's less so the Confederate flag. I mean, the Confederate flag is what it is, right? I mean, truth be told, the Confederate flag is the Union Jack. If you look at both of them right next to each other. So, I mean, it is. That's where they got it from. But just different color and a bunch of stars on it and a couple of stripes missing. But if you look at them, they're the same flag. So I mean, it's just they're using that as the issue and the excuse now. There were a couple of black pit crew members from a couple of different teams. There was an issue with that. I think part of it was also when they were having a race. I believe it was in. It was the Confederate flag issue on the state house of one of the state flags, and it just happens to be on there. So they tied the two together and said, okay, well, we're going to cancel, meetings and conferences in that particular state. And then they said, okay, well, NASCAR, what are you going to do? And they were like, we're going to tell you to pound sand. We're going racing, right? Ricky Bobby wanted to go. And, and so then people were like, oh, well, you don't care. That's not important to you. And, they had a choice. We either side with the racist or we don't. Now, the bad part was it started at a time when it was still publicly bad to do so. Now, since Trump came in and some of these other right-wing people over the last, 10, 15 years in our country, your country, and a couple others, France and stuff, and Austria, now it's like, yeah, it's a badge of honor to be outwardly racist like it's the 50s and 60s, colonial days. So, so all this stuff kind of came in at a time when they couldn't, and it's just continuing to go. Now, over here, yeah, we don't hear about it at all. It's, I can drive up and down the street and see Confederate flags on cars and trucks and on houses and stuff like that. Nobody bats an eye, right? The next main street over is a street called Dixie, right? With all of its connotations. I mean, Dixie basically is just a word that means, slave holding South, like antebellum. It's the same, they can be used interchangeably. It's also the street that goes from the middle part of the state all the way down to the Keys. And it is actually the dividing line between black people and white people. Everybody that lives in South Florida will be able to know exactly what I'm talking about if they hear this, right? And to this day, on the east side of the street, the west side of the street, which is right next to it where all the black people are, and that street is a mile away from me. On the other side of that street, there are no grocery stores. There are no clothing stores. It is divided, literally exactly what it is. So, I mean, that's the reality of things. Yeah, let me shut up before I get in trouble here.
No, but I think that was a good answer. And again, just for us living in Europe and obviously as well, Georgina based in Sri Lanka as well, it gives us perspective because we only see what is on the TV and what's told us in the media. And having this more authentic and organic perspective from you, Malik, makes all the difference. So I'm glad that you've pointed out those things as well. And just to round up this, I say this every week, but I thought this has been an education. Definitely an education on discrimination. That rhymes. But just to round this thing up, and this is a question to both of you guys, how can we as the fans continue to put pressure on sport to do the right things and to ensure that fairness is achieved somewhat for the parties involved?
Mm. I mean, I'll come in first and then let Malik paint the Sistine Chapel. But I think, with the beauty of your verbiage. But like, I feel like I'm a hypocrite in this regard because you know what I should do? I should just stop watching, and that's what we should do. And we should find something. I know that we talked about NASCAR and we were joking and sort of talking about the Deep South, but IndyCar may have some issues as well. But when you look at the way that they look after their fans and they're hungry to get fans and they will bend over backwards, like essentially, if you're in a toxic relationship, what you need to do is have the strength to leave. So if fans want to make F1 fairer, and I know that this is hard and I'm not even doing it myself, you basically just need to stop paying. And we probably all follow Lewis Hamilton. When he's gone, and I've watched Formula One for many years before Lewis Hamilton, when he's gone, I'm gone. So that's what we need to do. That's my view.
Strong. And Malik, what's your take?
Ditto. Sistine Chapel that. No, I mean, I had said this myself, and I mean, there's not a single word that I'm going to disagree with Blag about. I had said myself, when all the stuff with Abu Dhabi went down, and throughout the year, but I mean, that one right there was just the middle finger to the eye, right? I was, we all have our opinions. And it's hard to, like you just said, I mean, because I'm not doing it either. So it's hard to leave that chick that's just like, ugh, good Lord. I mean, I want to leave and she's bad for me and she's toxic. But have you seen her? You know what I mean? It's like that. And we've all been there, hopefully. But I was of the opinion, just kind of spitballing and saying, I wish Vale and Lewis Hamilton would team up on a touring, GT3 or GT something touring team, or start doing 24-hour, endurance racing. Something that, I mean, because, you can't get bigger than those two, right? For the most part. And pull those, like, even if they sponsor a team or co-sponsor a team with, like, say, Michael Jordan and some, Serena Williams and all these other cats, right? And they get a team together. Jordan probably more likely to do it than anybody else, but they get a team together and they go out enduro racing, and you can still have, your Mercedes connection if they want to, still sponsor that. Whether it's Toto or Susie, I'd probably rather Susie than Toto myself. But, and you pull those fans away. Not, I honestly hope that when he does walk away, and I stopped watching after Senna passed for a little while, because I was just like, who else is there? Like Hill, to me, those guys that drove in those 4, 5, 6 years between Senna passing and maybe 2000 were basically a bunch of Roman Grosjeans. They still get, credit for winning, but really is like Mazepin versus Stroll versus Grosjean versus Piquet, right? Piquet Jr. To me, I'm like, you guys are just the rest, because your Prost had left or he was gone. Mansell was done. The GOATs, and there were many of them, they were all gone. So we just had like a bunch of bums. So it's like, I'm like, Damon Hill's like, yeah, I've been there. Everybody likes Button. I can't remember how many times Button won. I think he won just 2009, right?
Yeah, it's one championship.
So, okay, say Button won a championship. Okay, good for him. But if you had 20 Buttons out there, I mean, he's not in anybody's discussion. I mean, he seemed like a nice guy and everything. I'm not hating on him, but I'm just saying, I like to use Grosjean because I hate him, to death. But Grosjean wins a championship. Like, so I stubbed my toe yesterday. I could care less. Who was he racing? Nobody. So I had hoped that Hamilton and Vale could team up and do something, because we'll watch that. So as fans, I think the fans, we don't realize that all the power that we have, right? The money isn't from the individual sponsors. The money is from the TV. There's more of us everywhere around the world than could ever show up at a race. And so if you only lived off of the tickets, I mean, you still will make a couple bucks, but it pales in comparison to the billions that you're going to make from TV. All right, well, if we tune into something else, guess what? They're going to have to improve the product and the way that the product is delivered to everybody else. I mean, it sounds like Pusha T at the moment now, but so yeah, we have to be willing to walk away. And the F1 and the FIA succeeded in what they aimed to do from Abu Dhabi. Is they said, you know what, let's just hurry up and get the season started. People will get off of our ass. We did. People, once, someone other than maybe Verstappen started winning or having a little bit more success, then people will tune in. Even Hamilton fans are like, I'd rather cheer for Leclerc than Verstappen. And so, so we're fine with, we're not even thinking about it last year. As long as what happened last year doesn't happen to Verstappen again, we're fine with it. Okay, well, they probably don't have to do that yet until later. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't really improve. So we have to be, and if we know that there was no meaningful improvement, then that means that the product itself hasn't changed. And so we've got to be willing to say, you know what, screw them. Let's go watch foosball. I don't know what you guys call it in England, but foosball. You guys call it the same thing?
Five-a-side. F1blag. We call it five-a-side, don't we?
Right. I mean, just extreme paintball or something. I mean, which is fun, but you got to be willing to walk away. We own Formula One more than, like, if we weren't watching, they wouldn't be driving. You know what I'm saying? So, and we don't take ownership in it the way that we should. We control way more than what they do. The only reason why they're on Netflix is because we're on Netflix. If we turn away from Netflix, guess where they won't be? Netflix. They're chasing us. So, yeah, we got to be willing to say, you know what? Screw you guys. And that kind of, segues back to Miami and say, listen, you guys are going to treat these people fairly, then we, as the fans, are not going to watch this race, because the people in Miami Gardens aren't going to that race. They can't go to the race anyway. So if we're not watching that race, they'll probably stop doing that shit. They'll tighten up, and the product will be a lot better. I think we should also do things to antagonize them way more. You know what I'm saying? Make them understand that this is our sport. You just run it. We control it. You run it. That's the relationship. And if they don't understand that relationship, then, what's the sound of a tree falling in the forest if nobody's there to hear it, right? It's literally the exact same thing. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
So true. Yeah.
So, I mean, Blag is 1,000% correct. If you're not willing to walk away, I mean, next chick might not be as hot. She all right.
Wifey material, though.
I mean, maybe common law marriage, slumber party material. I don't know, whatever. But you're gonna get me in trouble here. But yeah, I mean, you got to be willing to walk away. Got to be willing to walk away. And the bad part is we're talking about it. So are we?
That's true. There's a lot to think about in that regard as well. And food for thought and nuggets of information and just like concepts just to really process there as well. But you guys are both spot on.
We're contributing. We're as much contributors to the. I wouldn't say as much. Let me definitely not say that, but we are contributing. We are contributing to the issue. The four of us here, are also. We have to take our responsibility because we watched, qualifying and practice and all this other stuff when we can. I had tryouts, I couldn't, but we watched that stuff. So guess what? We are doing to the people in Miami Gardens also, because we will probably watch that race. So we could, talk all the shit that we want and talk about how bad it is, but we have to understand our personal responsibility in hurting those people, right? And kind of like what we were saying a long time ago, I think with your question about how can people in some of these other countries understand, we may be worse because we understand the problem, we understand what those people are going through, yet we might still be watching it and contributing to their 10 years of misery, right? So are we any better just because we're aware? Are we willing to walk away from it? Or can we do something that makes up that difference? Advocate as much as we can, force some input from those folks, into it. Us force Formula One to engage with the people that are there because they haven't. You know what I'm saying? We're all, some of us, most of us, we're Mercedes fans. Russell was doing PR outside of the track. No one's called him out because he might be our guy. We might, sometimes parents got to, spank their own kids if they're putting their fingers in the electric socket. Sometimes you got to do that. It's like, listen, does George know? Does Judge know and not care? Have we even asked? I'm a serious Hamilton fan. Does Hamilton know? Have we even asked? You know what I'm saying? So, because he comes to Miami a lot, so I'm sure he's familiar with where Miami Gardens is. But then again, we don't know because we haven't asked. So, that's just, personal responsibility. And, we have to have it. It's a global sport. We're all responsible for everybody else. It's not a slogan. It literally is that. And, I'm not trying to soapbox nothing. I'm not trying to Sistine Chapel or anything. Like I said, I'm an attorney. I can talk forever. But, that I think is important for a lot of us to think about and walk away with.
Well, you know what? On that bombshell, I'm going to say it's been an absolute honor to have both Malik and F1blag on this episode of Jorgy Stripping the Dipping, because I really think we stripped everything down to the bone on this episode. Like, it's given me a lot of food for thought. I think it's quite therapeutic as well that, we've chopped it up in this kind of way and like gone through it systematically, to a T as to what the fundamental issues are, not only with them, but with us as well, and the self-reflection we have to do. And yeah, I just want to throw it back on the floor to you guys, Malik and F1blag as well, just to, any kind of last thoughts you want to say before we conclude this episode. And also, where can they find you guys?
After you, Mr. Blag, sir.
Okay, I was trying to be smart and remember who painted the Sistine Chapel. Is it Michelangelo or someone like that? I might.
I think it was Pikachu. No, I think it was Pikachu.
I think that's but no, where could you find me? So I wrote an article about reasons to be cheerful on the 44. So that's @_ the 44. My Twitter is @F1blag. Check it out, interact. I'm keen, in spite of the fact that we're probably empowering Formula One and the monster that it is to grow. I'm really keen to hear what people think about all the subjects we've discussed. And as a final thought, I suppose the question that Malik challenged us all in his thread the other day was, what are we doing about this? I think what we can try and do is raise awareness of it. In my view, the way we were most successful on the sort of backlash against Abu Dhabi is when we sort of cut through and we got people, it's a bit of a sad statement of affairs, but verified checkmark people, people that have media following, people that when they say something, it ends up on the news. If we can get those people talking about what's going on in Miami Gardens, that might be something that we can just do. So I'll leave it at that and hand over to Michelangelo. Over to you.
Oh, Pikachu.
You can find me at actually I gotta figure out how does this thing work. It's Malik _WL Well VHS, or at WL Well VHS. I guess aside from that, like I said, I am an education, civil rights, dependency, and family attorney here in South Florida. I am also the CEO of a healthcare telehealth platform and mental health dispatch system called WL Well. So it is available on Android or iOS platforms. So download it. We need like about 5,000 more so that we can be the first one that you guys go to and find out. Hopefully we're going to be in the EU later on this year when I finally get enough courage to get on an airplane and get on out there to register. But, it's been an absolute pleasure. I apologize for monopolizing a ton of the time. I know Blag Diggy probably had a whole lot more that he wanted to say, but I guess I wasn't out of paint yet. So, and I broke out the spray can and started tagging and stuff like that. So I apologize, sir. But I had absolute a blast. And I hope the next time, if I'm ever invited back, that the Sri Lankan tourism board can fly us all out there to where Georgina is, and we can do this on like a beach or something. Our beaches suck, so you can't get in the water. So that's another reason to not come out here. Our water is polluted at the beach. They won't tell you that, but it is.
Okay, the more you live, the more you learn. But Malik, thank you for that.
Flying by.
F1blag as well, and awesome. Like, I think that this is going to be a really, good episode and a lot of stuff for listeners to pick up on. So I'm looking forward to its official release. And yeah, just to let the STD. I gotta come up with a better name for the listeners as well. I can't really refer to them as a sexually transmitted disease, but
Who's
STD
an STD?
also trending. I was saying STD for stripping the dipping, but yeah, maybe not. But maybe it stands for something else. But
I will make sure that I do not clap at the end then.
I need to come up with a better nickname for the audience, or of such. But you also got a lot more to look forward to as well, because I think next episode after this, me and Georgina are doing a 25 question podcast where we're just gonna ask each other random crap. So if there's anything that you want to ask me or Georgina on F1, not F1, please let us know as well at the end. But as always, guys, we hope that you found this session very insightful. I know I did for a fact. And until next time, a huge shout out to our guests. Make sure you go and follow them with their respective ads, and we will catch you all soon. But until then, peace.